Hi, I'm Edwin Rutsch, Director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and this is Dialogues on how we can build a culture of empathy. And today I'm here with Susan Stillman. Thanks, Susan, for joining me for this
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm pleased and
So,
honored to be here.
so to just introduce you, you're Director of Education at the 6 Seconds, the Emotional Intelligence Network, and the Institute for Social Innovation. Is that?
The Institute for Social Innovation is I'm a fellow there. It's at Fielding Graduate University, but my full-time work is as Director of Education, as you said, for 6 Seconds, which is a global EQ network, emotional intelligence network, where we reach out to literally hundreds of thousands of people every day and encourage the development of EQ important skills, including, one of the most important of all, empathy.
Oh, great. Perhaps you could just introduce yourself a bit more about your cell phone.
Got
A
to
little
turn
bit
that off.
about
Yeah.
yourself. You're an
Yeah.
educator, and if you could.
Sure. Sure, I'd love to. Well, I started out my career as a school counselor and spent 30 some odd years as a school counselor at a K-8 public school in Connecticut, at a high school in Vermont, an independent high school in Vermont. So I've been involved in the counseling world for a long time, and then became a licensed and certified counselor, a national certified counselor, all those things. And then started teaching school counselors, which was really wonderful to be able to kind of promote the next generation of school counseling. And school counselors have known for a long time about social emotional learning skills and about empathy, but not used some of the same language that we're using now. And then a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, I became Director of Education for 6 Seconds, which was wonderful because it was the first time that we've had a Director of Education. So we really began to focus on taking the EQ skills, the emotional intelligence skills that people use in the world, and really connecting those with education. And that movement is known in this country as social emotional learning. And so 6 Seconds was really able to align itself with the Castle movement and the social emotional learning that really we've been promoting here since the late 1990s, when since 6 Seconds also began. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I've seen that. So the social emotional learning is like this broad umbrella, and empathy is like a slice of that.
That's exactly right.
And I've seen that you're starting to get interested. Kind of focusing on that empathy part. I've kind of been watching, I track all the articles and so forth around empathy, and I'll just show this here, though, as I think this is it. Oh, that's not it. I have a screen share here.
Oh, great.
That I was going to show. Oh, there we go. So this was an article I saw on the 6 Second site, and this was with a conference you had done with Marco Iacoboni.
Yes.
And that was one of the first articles I saw that you did about empathy. I was just curious about that. I've interviewed Marco several times, and he's just like a wonderful person to talk to. And
he is. This was actually, it wasn't so much a conference, but a master class for practitioners sort of related to the 6 Seconds model, who've really been diving in very deeply. And it's this wonderful opportunity at Pajaro Dunes in Santa Cruz to really experience deeply and share and connect and learn and grow together. And so we were very fortunate to have Marco join us for a day or so there. And really, this was 2 years ago, really beginning to devote a lot of attention to neuroscience, and obviously to the mirror neurons, which he has studied so in depth. And one of the things I was thinking to tell you about was that in schools now, people are so interested in neuroscience and in how we can help teach kids about that. So beginning to take that information and translate that into language that kids can understand, and talk to kids about what mirror neurons are, what being hijacked by your amygdala means, where your emotions are not really, you're not in charge of your emotions any longer, where your thinking skills, your neocortex can really take over. I read a wonderful quote the other day by Daniel Rutsch, who's written a nice new book on mindfulness in education. He said, you know, teach kids that you can be the captain of your life, and you can be the captain by using that combination of thinking skills and feeling skills, so that your neocortex can intervene when when you're not able to navigate your emotions so well. And of course, that's the beginning of an opportunity to talk about empathy, and how once you're able to navigate those emotions and able to think cognitively about what that other person is feeling, then you can really begin to develop that empathy and act on that empathy. So it's great, and kids love to know about the neuroscience. So it isn't just them personally, but this is a scientific field now, and it can really help them, as it helps all of us, as it helps adults and teachers too.
So you're bringing that social emotional learning into the schools, and it sounds like you're bringing in the neuroscience of it. And
I think that's a really important piece of it. You know, there are many programs now. 6 Seconds has a curriculum, self-science, but we support and are interested in so many other wonderful SEL programs, some of them focusing just specifically on empathy, some of them focusing on mindfulness, for example, which is a very popular and hot topic right now, but that, of course, is about neuroscience as well, and how can we really take the ability to focus and to calm ourselves down, and how can we then use that to be more successful in our relationships and reaching our goals and in our life in general. So yeah, I think there are many different programs, as you know, I'm sure, that focus either narrowly and specifically with kind of a spotlight on empathy, such as the Roots of Empathy, which is a lovely program where you know, a baby is brought into the classroom and the students watch that baby. Is it Mary Gordon? Yeah, where the students watch that baby grow over the year. And there's some programs that focus more, for example, on emotional literacy, like Mark Brackett's Ruler program, where you're really focusing on learning the words and the vocabulary of emotions, and then sort of focusing in that way. In our program, in 6 Seconds, in our self-science curriculum, which really means we're studying ourselves, we focus, as you said earlier so well, we focus on 8 competencies, and empathy is one of the 2 in the domain or pursuit called Give Yourself. So we have Know Yourself, which is really emotional literacy. It's knowing words for feelings. It's recognizing patterns. We have Choose Yourself, which is applying consequential thinking. What happens if I do this? What happens if I use more empathy and I do that? It's talking about navigating emotions, as we talked about before. So when I can control my emotions, when I can validate my emotions, when I can explore them further, when I can decide what is the outcome that I really want, I might do a lot better. We talk about intrinsic motivation. We talk about optimism. The situation, you know, looks pretty bad today, but what are some things that can happen? What are some things I can do to have more self-efficacy? And finally, we talk about Give Yourself, which is empathy and pursuing a noble goal. And so that's very important. It doesn't matter which of these competencies you start with. It's they go around in a circle. So empathy, for many people, and I know it is for you because it's your life's work, empathy is the fulcrum, you know, kind of the core, but then it goes out to navigating emotions, it goes out to applying consequential thinking, it goes out to recognizing patterns, it goes out to noble goal, really. What's the outcome that we really want in our connections with other people, in our connections with the world, in our connections with you know, all the different kinds of empathy, our connections with the animals, with the environment. You know, that's why empathy is so closely tied in to pursue a noble goal, which is our way of talking about purpose and our way of talking about what's really meaningful in life and what's something that is collaborative, what's something that's outside of ourselves and something that we maybe can never quite reach, but we're always seeking to go there. And what's something that, even though it's so broad and abstract, is something that we can practice every moment of every day. We're practicing it right now in our interaction. What's something that, it's kind of like seeing the world in a grain of sand. So empathy is so much a part of that sense of noble goal for so many people in the world. So
Yes.
it really, empathy supports and sustains us while we're practicing these other skills to connect with others and to be healthy and balanced and mindful. But empathy just kind of supports that.
Yeah, like you're saying, empathy for me is like this focal point. I mean, I think you
Yeah,
really hit it there. And
yeah,
one thing I've noticed is people create different focal points. Once I started interviewing people, I did a little documentary about people's values,
right.
and there's all these different. And everybody has a different value. Someone they'll say that most important value to me is justice, or compassion, or
Uh-huh.
peace, or whatever it is, freedom or liberty. And people create these focal points, and I always wonder, like, well, how do these all kind of relate with each other?
You know, it's a great, great question. And a lot of times teachers ask us that because, you know, teachers, some schools have missions or they have a statement about we want to create a caring and compassionate, you know, successful learners. And some schools talk about bullying, of course. That's like their big initiative. Well, of course, it needs to be. Some schools talk about character education, which you know, came up a long time ago in the 80s and then kind of faded and now has really come full circle and really relates very nicely to the social emotional learning movement. So, you know, there are all these virtues in character education, patience, loyalty, perseverance, connection, trust, humility. I don't know, there's many values, right?
Hmm.
Connection, I think, is really an important one. And I have developed a way of thinking about that, and it's certainly not the only way, but my way of thinking about that is that our competencies, our emotional intelligence or social emotional learning competencies, are the way to support those big values, those big concepts. So
Mm.
you can have a concept like social justice, is a wonderful example. And how can you have social justice if you don't start with empathy? You don't start with self-awareness, empathy in yourself for the suffering or the not just the suffering, but the disparities, the inequities, the systemic oppression in the world. So we need to kind of connect with that ourselves, and then we can apply some of our noble goal, or we can apply our consequential thinking, we can apply our optimism, we can apply our recognizing patterns. We can use those to really support and sustain our work in some of those big value-driven initiatives that we
Hmm.
have.
So it's kind of like the value, and then you have the underlying principles, maybe,
The,
that kind
and
of give you the
the
framework,
principles, yeah,
and then the larger kind of
yeah,
structures that support that. And I think you're also going towards, I mean, one thing I see empathy as is almost like a gateway towards other values.
exactly.
If we can't empathize with each other, we can't see our, what our feelings and needs and hopes and dreams are. It's kind of like a gateway to connect to those other values that people may have.
And it's very challenging. You know, we know that it's easy to empathize with a friend or a lover or someone that you're close to and agree with. But the challenge, of course, is empathizing with people who have such vastly different perspectives, people that we disagree with in small ways or in really large, you know, political, religious, socioeconomic ways. And so I think it's a real important thing, and that's why I'm glad my life right now is devoted to trying to work in schools where I believe we can really start with the little kids And maybe I should say start with the parents and the teachers of our youth, because really it doesn't start with the kids. It starts with who we are as the adults who work with those kids, who nurture them and teach them and model for them and interact with them, again, in challenging situations.
Well,
So
one
it's
thing,
not,
mhm,
yeah.
sorry.
Go
Well, one
ahead,
thing I
please.
wanted to show was you'd done a video. Hopefully this will come up. Yeah, there it is. What is empathy? Q&A with Dr. Susan Stillman, and
Yeah.
hopefully that's showing up on the screen. That was a recent. You go about explaining what empathy is in that
Yes.
video that anyone can check out. And I reposted that to our site, and it was really popular. So I thought it was just very accessible and very clearly done. So I think it was quite popular.
Thank you. You know,
Your,
one of the things that I loved about studying and diving into empathy, and I remember the very first time I did this was I was teaching graduate students in school counseling, and my colleague and I did a little research project where one of our groups, they were interns in school counseling, so this was their final year in their master's program, and her group did the regular school counseling curriculum, which focused, internship curriculum, which focused on advocacy, you know, social justice and advocacy. And my group did that curriculum, but we added all these, the skills of emotional intelligence. And I remember very clearly when we focused on empathy, it was right after the Fukushima nuclear reactor disaster. And it was right when I started getting involved with animal rescue efforts. And there was a video, which was just a beautiful video of people going into this radioactive zone as much as they were allowed to by the government and rescuing these dogs. And there was just a beautiful video of a dog rescue, very gentle, very caring, and beautiful music that they set it to. And I showed this to my graduate students in this program, and everyone was in tears, including me. And I had seen it like 3, 4, 5 times. And at the end, they said to me, you know, Dr. Stillman, thank you so much for showing us this for a couple of reasons. One, because we never realized that empathy was more than about people. You know, I mean, it seems sort of obvious, but it's not so obvious that really there are all those different types of empathy. And the empathy that people in the world show to animals, not just to dogs, but to all animals, is just incredibly powerful to me. It makes me cry just thinking about it. And so they said, number one, you taught us just a beginning glimmer of the idea that empathy is bigger than just about people. And two, you shared your vulnerability with us by us seeing you cry. And now we know that many times that's appropriate and that that's something we can do with our students as we move into the world to be school counselors. So that was very beautiful experience for me, and really the beginning of trying to understand about the different kinds of empathy, as you mentioned in that video, in that little interview that I did, and also about vulnerability and how important it is to, when we're promoting empathy, to be vulnerable and show our feelings and show our ability to cry and to share feelings that are difficult. And of course, Brene Brown does a wonderful job of talking about empathy and vulnerability and how it takes really getting in touch with our own feelings and exploring them openly with others.
Yeah, I'm wondering about those tears because there's something in there about a sense of connection, and I've been curious about that because last couple of days I've been at Google. They were having like a leadership forum there,
Yeah.
and I was presenting on empathy, and I started talking about empathy in my family, and I just started breaking down in tears, and so it was. And I was really wondering, it was almost like a sense of grief in terms of the sense of disconnection that we have in society, and the pain of disconnection, and how empathy is a way of reestablishing connection with others, and there's something so beautiful about that. And
it's absolutely crucial, and I think that you've really touched on one of the most important concepts, is that it is about connection in this age of, great chaos and disconnection. Not entirely, but, there's so much of that difficulty in the world of people finding a way to really connect meaningfully, that empathy really allows us to do that. And one of the things that I have been studying a lot and working with a lot, I have really since I was a school counselor 20, 30 years ago, but even more so now in the trainings that I do with teachers, is working on the concept of circles and, class meetings as circle time. Yeah. And just that sense that you were talking about being really connected, and that beautiful, beautiful practice of sitting together in complete equality, where everyone belongs and everyone is seen and everyone's word or their silence is respected, and just that incredible power of the circle as a place to teach and practice empathy, among other things that are related to empathy, as we said before, such as problem solving and conflict resolution. But I think just that basic sense of self-awareness and the awareness of others in that circle is really, it's just such a wonderful practice. And I had a chance to spend a day with some practitioners of circles recently at the Morningside Center here in New York City, and just really went very deeply into that concept of why circles really represent, if you will, that concept of social justice that we were talking about earlier, where they are, this basic belief that people are good and that together we can create a climate that supports everyone and sees everyone and creates compassion for everyone, and then taking that circle and moving out, taking our experience together and moving that out into the world. So
that's where I've also come to. Yeah, with the circle, there's what I've noticed is there's like a compassion movement, and the compassion movement I keep seeing in terms of methodology seems to be the mindfulness meditative practice.
Yeah.
And for what I see within the empathy, realm, that the practice is more like this empathic listening that was perhaps developed by, it was really expanded on by Carl Rogers, and I
love that.
Yeah, it's the core of therapy, for that matter. And what I've been looking at is how do we really bring that into relationships, where it's not a therapist-client relationship, but just people in relationship. And I think that circle, is like the next step in that people are really dialoguing with each other and hearing each other.
I had a quote about Carl Rogers that's in one of my PowerPoints that I think I wrote down, but I'm not sure where it is right now. But I was trained as a Rogerian therapist.
Okay.
That was my initial training. And so I think there's a quote of his that goes something about when we really listen and we let down our judgment, and when we really, really listen to someone else. I think the quote is, magic things happen.
He says it feels damn good.
It feels damn good is the other side of that quote, exactly. I know that one too. Yeah. And I have some lovely exercises that I've developed over time to do with kids. And really I was thinking though that any activity that you can do in a classroom is really an excuse, as one of my colleagues says. Any activity is an excuse for a, quote, a debrief. So you do an activity and then you talk about, well, what did that feel like to you and how did that feel like to others? And one of the, and how can you make a connection there? So one of my favorite activities that I teach teachers and that I used to do with kids all the time is called Newsy News, Serious News, and Personal News. And I don't know who that came from. I don't think I made it up, but these wonderful exercises kind of get passed along, and sometimes you lose the actual origin of them. I think it's important to give credit where credit's due. And in Newsy News, kids go around the circle and they talk about just great things that happened. I got a puppy, or I passed a test, or I'm excited because we're going to the county fair this weekend. And you still have a chance for kids to. One of the things we've learned in empathy, as I'm sure you have also taught and learned about, is the concept of mudita, which is joy in other people's joy, holding space for other people's joy. So at the very simplest level, we can teach kids to be excited when somebody shares some newsy news, like you were getting a puppy, or you just got a birthday coming up. So that's one, wonderful, and it's not any less important than empathy for a traumatic or a more difficult situation. And then kids share, if they choose to, and they can choose any one of these, which is a little bit of self-regulation. They can choose to share a newsy news, a great story, something good that's happening. They can share serious news, which is something obviously more serious. Someone's in the hospital. Perhaps parents are having difficulties. Perhaps the family has to move. Perhaps there was obviously a societal issue. There's so many school shootings now. I can hardly believe it that we just had another one. And so that's serious news, and then kids get to talk about that. And again, the teacher has modeled, and the kids have learned and practiced what does it mean to have empathy for more serious issues. But both of those are absolutely wonderful.
Are those circles? Just dialogues?
Always,
is it like a talking stick, or is it how are you kind of structuring those?
I usually do it going around a circle with a talking stick, but sometimes more people choosing, to sort of pop up when they want to. But it's usually it's still in the context of a circle, but we don't always go around. I know that the circle teaching philosophy often is going around with a talking stick, and I have great respect for that. I just like to vary things occasionally. But the third of that activity is called personal news, and that one is news where a student really passes and doesn't really want to share what that is, but we want to validate how important that is for kids to be able to pass and to say that they have personal news but they don't want to share it. Or they can just pass, of course, and that's equally appreciated. But the nice thing about the personal news is that, and we talk about this with the kids and with the teachers, what can we do when someone expresses that they have personal news? And we can, if we're their friend, if we have a moment of feeling compassion, we can go up to them afterwards and put our arm around them and say, I'm sorry, to hear that you have some personal news. The teacher, of course, it's very helpful for the teacher to know that, so they actually can act on it in a way that's appropriate from the teacher's point of view. So it's a great way for sort of self-regulating what you share in a classroom, families, and with great respect to these families who tell their kids don't share anything that's really going on in our family, and that's perfectly okay. But at least the kids have an opportunity to say that something's really on their mind without going into the details, and then those people who feel it's appropriate can approach them.
Well, something we've been doing is we call empathy circles, and this is small group discussion. Sometimes the talking stick type approach is with the whole big classroom, but it's breaking into small groups with 4 people or students. I guess it could be. I haven't done that with students.
Yeah.
But using empathic listening, kind of the reflective listening between each other. So in the sense that there's 4 of us, one person shares, but they speak to someone, that person reflects. And so it's a constant going back and forth, like using that empathic listening. I found that's been really, really helpful, and especially it's almost, and I've done it in my family with conflict, and it's almost like magic the way it has, the conflicts almost just unravel themselves, and then the action part just kind of comes together almost on its own. It just comes
naturally. I know exactly what you're saying. When I was a counselor, I used Naomi Drew's win-win guidelines, which I just love as a conflict resolution method. And some of the things that were crucial in that, some of them are the basic steps. I say my point of view, you say your point of view, and then somehow magically we're supposed to, be able to resolve it. Well, there's important steps in between.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on those, Edwin, when you said, so you really have to empathically listen to the other person. So that's really hard because you're telling me something and I disagree with you. And I say, well, that's just not true. That's not exact. That's not what happened. And the mediator, which can very much be a youth, which is wonderful when you teach this process to kids and they do it for themselves, is that you really need to reflect back what Susan said, what Edwin said, without any ifs, ands, or buts. You just need to really hear what each other said, okay? And then there's a wonderful step in that process which comes after the empathy, which is, okay, well, I guess maybe there was a little something that I did that might have contributed to this problem. And it's a little something. That's a key word, little, because you want to say face, right? So you don't want to say, okay, it was all my fault, but you want to say, there was a little something I did. And that would probably allow you to say, well, there was a little something I did too. And then, as you just said, magically the action steps, the brainstorming and action steps are apparent. So I think it does depend on that initial step of empathic listening and authentically listening and being able to suspend judgment and suspend your own hypothesis about why this came about.
Yeah, I've had in conflicts with my family, and tried to kind of hold that, and sometimes it's really hard. But if there's someone there to kind of keep the listening and the reflection going, then there's a lot of different steps to kind of build the container, I guess, for that. And that's what I've been looking at. Is like, what are the processes, the real practical processes for fostering empathy? So that whole, excuse me, the circle work, the empathic listening seems to be one part. The other part that I'm seeing is human-centered design as a process. I don't know if you've looked into that as a methodology.
Not so much, no. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, this is a process designed. This is from the design community that in like corporations, they need everything.
Okay.
Everything around us is designed, and they have these processes for groups getting together to problem solve or create products. And there's some organizations like IDEO, and they're here in the Bay Area, that have kind of been leaders in that field, and that process is now going into, they're taking it into education. They call it design thinking or human-centered design, or even empathic design is a
So I read about something like that where a company that I think was designing supplies for people with diabetes, and I'm sensitive to that because my son has juvenile diabetes, grew up with it, and where they really took the employees of that company and they had them go through a day of the steps that you would take, role-playing in a way, but sort of being that person during the day. And there are many kind of simulations like that people are starting to do in schools, I think, also, to really have that experience. And even just kids going out and spending time at a homeless shelter or at an animal shelter, or really kind of, being with people and, in a real authentic way, and not just kind of serving food to people, but really kind of living with them. That's really a wonderful experience for kids to do. I know some programs, some educational programs are really dedicated to that.
Yeah, that's becoming the center of the work I'm doing now, is the human-centered design. And I think that whole circle work that you're talking about fits in the front end of that. And even Stanford's even started a design school now. So it's becoming very popular in terms of in corporations, in education, and in social innovation too, all these organizations. So that seems to be one of the leading edges for the empathy work, is what I'm sensing.
So it's really, goes back to that basic getting into the shoes of another, experiencing the world from, someone else's viewpoint, which is, one of the kind of more simple empathy definitions, and I think that's really it's a beautiful experiment to really have kids understand and work together and live together. One of the websites that I follow, I think, is the Perez School for Sports, and it's Palestinian and Israeli youth, and they play sports together and they live and work together. And there's so many wonderful examples of that in the world that we don't really get to hear about so much, of people really really talking and listening and getting each other's perspectives, and knowing what it's like to be in a different region in the world. One of the things that's beautiful about the work that I'm fortunate to do at 6 Seconds is that we speak with each other around the world all the time. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit about the Empathy Adventure, which is an opportunity to do that. But we have another program where, and we have talked a lot about empathy in this program, that I wanted to tell people about because it's completely free. It's called ISEL, or small I, capital SEL, so Introduction to Social Emotional Learning for Educators. And our big goal is 25,000 educators as a start taking this program. And it's 6 sessions, and each session we have a lot of work on our e-learning site, which lots of videos. I'd invite you, Edwin, to be on that. We can always add videos to that. And one of our modules in those 6 sessions is what 3 skills might we really choose to emphasize, and out of all the skills we can. And the 3 skills we chose were emotional literacy, empathy, and mindfulness. So we've had some wonderful, wonderful opportunities because there's a discussion posts on that iCell. So people go through the e-learning site on their own. They have the opportunity to come to weekly online discussions, usually no more than 10 people at a time, many times 3 or 4 or 5 people at a time. So powerful discussions with educators about topics like empathy, about how to integrate social emotional learning, about self-awareness, about character education and values, about how to sustain an SEL process in a school. But what's so joyful about it to me is speaking with people from all over the world. So, I mean, literally, we've had calls with 10 people from 10 different countries. So that's really wonderful, and it's entirely free. That's something that we would love to have people do. And what was great about it is we had to sort of choose 3 skills that we wanted to emphasize in the module on, well, what skills would you teach? And I love the fact that we chose empathy and emotional literacy. So start with self-awareness. Empathy is taking that emotional literacy out to others and to understanding the feelings of others and then to acting on them. And mindfulness, kind of bringing it all together, or maybe the result of that. So people had a lot of fun kind of using those ideas and thinking about how they relate to each other. And always, always, always foremost in our minds, how can we make this practical? How can you use this today? How can the result of our conversation today inspire people to have empathic conversations with others? How can we dedicate ourselves to a week of really focusing on empathy? And, one of our competencies in our 6 Seconds model is recognizing patterns. And so helping people to recognize their patterns, to see how they can maybe validate those patterns and then explore with optimism, explore ways of being more empathic, deepening our empathic connections.
Okay, so yeah,
it's a great opportunity. I wanted to sort of give people.
So, and then there's the Empathy Adventure. That's that's coming up now.
It's coming up starting Friday. Yeah.
Okay, I can actually show that here. This is the web page on the 6second.org website, and you have some resources there, and make it.
So yeah, so we have in the last 6 months or so, we've developed another website, which is called, fortunately enough, EQ.org. And EQ.org is what we call our member website, where we are interested in promoting the goal of our company, which is 1 billion people of our organization network, from having 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence by 2039, which is the 100th birthday of our founder, Dr. Annabelle Jensen. And so we want to ripple out emotional intelligence in every way that we can in a very low cost or free way, which is why our iCell course is entirely free. And we are doing this through EQ.org, where people can join as a free member, and there's many resources and groups that they can start. Anyone can start a group on EQ.org and get people together to talk and to work and then to plan projects together. So our first project was the iCell course for educators. There were 1 or 2 other short projects, and our next big project is the Empathy Adventure. And people do have to join EQ.org to participate in that, but if there's any reason why people can't join for the $50, that is an entire year of belonging to EQ.org, being able to put their own websites up, being able to connect with people, as we've talked about, all over the world. You know, there should be no financial constraints, though, so people can always contact us and say, I want to join, but, you know, I'm not going to be able to afford that. That's perfectly okay. We just need to know that. But so Empathy Adventure, we will have 3 or 4 online meetings. We anticipate probably 40, 50 people in that group. We will share a little bit, some of those videos. We'll talk about empathy. We'll have small empathy circles as part of that. People will go out and do some empathy acts during the time. They'll come back and share their experience. They'll share their patterns. They'll share what they've recognized. They'll inspire each other to go out and do more the following time. We'll end up with, after 3 or 4 sessions, with some tips for developing empathy that we can share with the world. Maybe our group will do a webinar, but it will be, you know, all of our members, all the people who join this group. It won't be just 6 Seconds people. It will be everyone who is part of this wonderful adventure. So we just invite people to go over to EQ.org and see if they're interested in joining the Empathy Adventure, which the first call will be a webinar call, is next Friday, June 20th at 8 a.m. Pacific time.
Well, it sounds like you're bringing people together, and this is maybe like an ongoing exploration of empathy. Is it like a kind of beginning of a little, sort of like a platform for exploring and working together?
I'm thrilled that really the first competency of our 6 Seconds model that we are using and that we're focusing on, as we said before, is empathy. So I'm really thrilled about that, and I'm hoping that you'll come and join us and, you know, contribute your help to that. But it's really, we have a design team of about 5 or 6 people, including someone from Italy. And the people that I know who've joined, I'd say probably 10 different countries so far from around the world. So it is an adventure, and we're excited about the opportunity. We've posted a couple of links, a video that sort of went viral a little while ago that you might know, Edwin. It's the one about the little child I think it's in Thailand, who steals something to feed his sick mother, and the shopkeeper has empathy and gives the child the food after he's been caught stealing, gives the child the food, and then, you know, comes back, pay it forward sort of 30 years later. And so that's just one example of some of the lovely discussions and resources that we have. You know, people can go out, I know you've done it, and find hundreds and thousands of wonderful examples of videos and books and poems and things that people have done. And I think it's really important when we're talking about empathy to inspire people, you know, to hook people with something really emotional. And then, as we said before, really be open to really deeply sharing. And it's amazing, I've learned, how you can do that online. It's just amazing how close and intimate you can have conversations with people who are, 5,000 miles away.
I'm wondering, how long is this program, the Embassy Adventure? Is this like continuously
Empathy
ongoing, or
Adventure
is there
will
a?
be, no, it's going to be approximately 6 weeks,
Okay.
but the group of people who, are the organized part of it will be 6 weeks, but we have the project and then we have a group, and the group is the people who are in the project, and after the project we can add anyone else to that group. So
Okay.
that group will be ongoing, and if that group decides to um, do the next iteration of it or invite others to it, or ideally, because of our philosophy of trying to ripple this out, every one of those, I think we have maybe 30 people signed up at this moment, and we'll probably get another 30 or so before next week. Each one of those people goes out and does their own empathy group, their own empathy project, wherever they are in the world. Then we have, a hundredfold, a thousandfold experience of empathy, and that's what we're trying to do.
Oh, great. Well, I think that's really exciting because you've really been in the whole emotional intelligence field and done conferences and just all kinds of different things that I've seen that you've done. So you've got a pretty good reach out there. So, and to bring empathy as a topic and bring your community together is pretty exciting. And so I'll do what I can to get the word out about
That
that,
would be great.
and
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Continue this dialogue within that framework as well, and keep working, working
As you
together
said
to
earlier,
foster more.
it's about connection, and just an amazing connection that we feel when we open ourselves up, whether we're parents or any family members or teachers or peers or team members. Just that sense of, it starts with empathy. It starts with our self-awareness, and as you said, it just feels good. As Carl Rogers said, it feels good.
He said it a bit more strongly than that.
He does. I know that, but I think that is a point that I want to make, though, just maybe in closing, is that, and we really talk about this a lot, even though our schools are focused, of course, on success for kids, they really are focused on, in my mind, they should be focused on creating a learning community for all the people in the school. And empathy is really just such a core need that we want to develop in, not just in kids, but in everyone in the school, for each other, that sense of compassion, that sense of acting out of deep caring for each other. And so it's really, it's surprising what a journey it really is, which is why we called it the Empathy Adventure. I did want to say one more thing, which is that empathy can be taught, it can be modeled, it can be practiced, learned, and it can be measured. And one of the things that I'm happy to work with is our tool, our social emotional intelligence assessment, which is called the SEI, S-E-I, and we have a similar one for youth. And as part of the SEI, we have an empathy component, and so we can measure the empathy component. And it's really nice to see it change. So I just tell you from my own personal experience with the SEI, I think I've taken it, and I teach it now, and it's part of a course that I facilitate. But when I took it the first time, and here I was, a school counselor, right, a counselor all my life, I was like, oh, that's kind of a little bit lower than I thought it would be. And it's amazing how once you have that awareness of, where you are with empathy, we also have another assessment called the SEI 360, where people can give you feedback on your performance on those competencies. So I can also get feedback on how other people think my empathy is going. And once you see that and you really are honest with yourself, I just can't tell you what a difference that's made in my life over the last 2 or 3 years, until the next time I took that assessment, which was just a couple months ago. And really we all continually can spend our lives deepening our empathy and just feeling so much better because the world comes back and repays us in joy and connection.
So it's
So I
really
think
that growing in that empathy there, and
it's
saying, "Oh, I'm
continually
growing. It
growing.
feels really good to know that I'm progressing." Sort of.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and then it goes outward because then the more we can contribute that empathy to the world, the more we create that peace that we're talking about. You know, we can create a peace corner in a classroom. We can create an entire classroom of peace through that circle process, and we can create a school and a community and hopefully a world
Yeah,
where
there's a
there's
quote
more
from
peace.
Johann Galtung. He says, "Peace is resolving conflict with empathy and creativity. It's a never-ending process."
Never-ending process. Yeah.
So I'm so glad to be in this process with you, Susan. So thank you so much for having taken the time to share all these wonderful insights in your journey, your own process, and your own journey. And I'm looking forward to taking part, and would recommend anyone else that can take part as well. So.
Great. They need to go to eq.org, which is easy to remember.
And I'm going to show that on the screen here. So that's it, the eq.org
That's
website,
it.
and
Yep.
anyone can go check that out.
And there you can see the Empathy Adventure and the iCell, the teacher project that we have too. And on the side, just to encourage people, it says, got an idea, what project would you like to see? So I've been thinking, as a matter of fact, Edwin, of creating a project on resilience. So that's just another idea. And we just encourage anyone who's a member of eq.org to get together with other people, propose a project. Maybe it'll be Empathy Adventure Part 2. You know, it could be anything. And that's what it's meant for. It's meant for creativity and, you know, with love and compassion and EQ.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, and look forward to connecting it in your at your Empathy Adventure site.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So long. Bye.
Bye.